My family claimed the Christmas trip was full, but my solo vacation made them flood my phone after my brother's fiancé saw my posts and said she wished she could have skipped it too. Apparently, the full cabin had plenty of room for my sister's 3 dogs, but not for me, so I spent Christmas week in Switzerland instead. The irony wasn't lost on me as I watched Emma's Instagram stories from their cozy family gathering. 3 golden retrievers sprawled across the living room while she complained about feeling excluded from family conversations. The phone started buzzing at 6 a.m. Swiss time with frantic calls from my mother. "Rebecca, honey, we need to talk. Emma showed us your posts. And, well, there seems to be some confusion about the trip arrangements." Her voice carried that particular strain she got when one of her carefully orchestrated family narratives was crumbling. Through my hotel window, I could see the pristine slopes of Zermatt while she stumbled through explanations about space limitations and last-minute changes. What my family didn't know was that I'd been expecting their betrayal for months. As the family accountant, I'd helped arrange the finances for their precious cabin rental in Colorado, the same cabin I'd supposedly been uninvited from due to space constraints. But I'd also quietly documented every family slight, every casual exclusion, every time my contributions were dismissed or forgotten. This Christmas rejection was simply the final insult that activated a plan I'd been cultivating for 2 years, one that would expose exactly how little they valued the person who'd been subsidizing their lifestyle all along. Growing up as the middle child in the Sterling household meant mastering the art of invisible usefulness. While my older sister Madison commanded attention with her dramatic career changes, and my younger brother Jake charmed everyone with his perpetual optimism, I became the family's reliable problem solver. Need help with taxes? Call Rebecca. Struggling with a budget? Rebecca knows spreadsheets. Can't figure out why your credit score dropped? Rebecca studied finance for a reason. The pattern had been building for years, but this Christmas exclusion was particularly cruel because I'd specifically requested time off from my consulting firm to join the family trip. I'd even offered to upgrade the cabin rental to ensure everyone had space, an offer my mother had dismissed with a wave of her hand. "Oh, that's sweet, honey, but we've already got everything sorted. Besides, you work so much, maybe you need a real break instead of dealing with all our chaos." That conversation had taken place in October, back when I still believed my value to the family extended beyond my wallet. By November, I'd discovered the truth through Madison's careless social media posts showing floor plans and room assignments for a cabin that could easily accommodate 12 people. The same week, my mother had called asking if I could help out with Jake's engagement ring purchase. Apparently, his sales job wasn't covering the cost of the 2-carat diamond Emma had her heart set on. The real breaking point came 2 weeks before Christmas when Madison casually mentioned during a family dinner that they'd need to bring all 3 of her golden retrievers because her regular pet sitter had canceled. "It's fine, though," she'd laughed. "They can sleep in the extra bedrooms. Dogs are way less complicated than people anyway." She'd said this while looking directly at me, as if daring me to point out the obvious insult. That night, I'd gone home to my downtown Denver apartment and opened the file I'd been quietly building. A comprehensive record of every family expense I'd covered, every loan that had never been repaid, every time my financial expertise had been exploited. The numbers were staggering, even to me. Over 3 years, I'd contributed over $37,000 to various Sterling family ventures, from Jake's previous engagement, which ended when his ex kept the ring, to Madison's multiple career investments, to my parents' kitchen renovation that had mysteriously doubled in cost. But money was just the beginning. I'd also documented the emotional manipulation, the casual dismissals, the way my accomplishments were minimized, while my siblings' failures were celebrated as learning experiences. Every family gathering where I'd been volunteered for cleanup duty while others relaxed. Every holiday where my practical gifts were forgotten while Madison's expensive trinkets were treasured. Every conversation where my input was ignored until someone else suggested the exact same solution. The Switzerland plan had crystallized during a particularly patronizing call from my father about my workaholic tendencies. He'd suggested I needed to learn to live a little, instead of always being so serious about everything. This from a man who'd asked me to co-sign his boat loan 6 months earlier because his credit wasn't quite good enough. The same boat that had somehow become too small to include me on family fishing trips. As I'd booked my Christmas week in Zermatt, I'd felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I was making plans that were entirely about my own happiness. No family obligations, no guilt trips, no carefully managed expectations. Just me, first-class accommodations, and a luxury ski resort where my presence was genuinely welcomed because I was paying premium rates for premium treatment. The Sterling family was about to learn that their reliable middle daughter had been keeping very detailed records of exactly how they'd been treating their personal bank account. And unlike my usual quiet accommodations to their demands, this lesson was going to be delivered with Swiss precision and absolutely no regard for their comfort or convenience. They thought they could train me to accept scraps while feeding the dogs at the main table. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when the person holding their financial safety net decided to let them fall. The first crack in their facade appeared on Christmas Eve when Jake called. his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Rebecca, hey, so, funny story. The credit card company called about some unusual activity, and apparently there's an issue with the cabin payment. They're saying the backup card on file was declined. His attempt at casual confusion didn't mask the underlying desperation. I was currently enjoying champagne and caviar at the Matterhorn Lodge, while he scrambled to figure out why their holiday was suddenly in financial jeopardy. What Jake didn't know was that I'd quietly removed myself as the backup payment method on all family bookings 3 weeks earlier. The cabin rental, the catered Christmas dinner, even the ski equipment reservations. Everything had been secured with the understanding that Rebecca Sterling's platinum card would cover any shortfalls. Now they were discovering that Madison's maxed out credit and Jake's modest sales income weren't quite sufficient for their champagne lifestyle. Oh, that's strange, I replied, taking another sip of Dom Perignon while watching snow fall over the Swiss Alps. Maybe you should call the rental company directly. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Through the phone, I could hear heated whispers in the background, Madison's voice rising as she argued with someone about deposit requirements, and my mother's increasingly shrill attempts to maintain control of the situation. The real chaos began when Emma posted her first story from the cozy family gathering. The video showed her sitting awkwardly in a corner while my parents argued with rental management in the kitchen. Jake frantically scrolled through banking apps, and Madison's 3 dogs destroyed a throw pillow that apparently cost more than the original security deposit. Her caption read, "When family time gets a little too real, I'd sure blessed and trach from family drama and sure send help." By Christmas morning, my phone was exploding with increasingly frantic messages. Madison had posted a passive-aggressive story about ungrateful family members who abandon ship when things get complicated, followed immediately by my mother's damage control call claiming there had been a miscommunication about my invitation. "We always wanted you here, sweetheart. Madison just meant the rooms were assigned, not that there wasn't space for you." The beautiful irony was that while they scrambled to salvage their disaster, I was posting picture-perfect moments from my solo luxury vacation, professional ski instruction on pristine slopes, private fondue dinner with a view of the Matterhorn, spa treatments that cost more per hour than Jake made in a day. Each post was carefully crafted to showcase not just my happiness, but my obvious financial independence from their drama. Emma's increasingly bitter comments on my posts revealed the growing tension at their perfect family gathering. Under my photo of a 5-course Christmas dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, she'd written, "Wow, must be nice to have the freedom to just disappear when your family needs you most." But her next comment, posted just an hour later after apparently consuming significant amounts of wine, was more revealing. "Actually, this looks way better than arguing about money and dog hair in the cranberry sauce. Can I join you next year?" That's when I knew my plan was working perfectly. Emma's public admission that my solo vacation looked preferable to their family gathering was the crack in their narrative that would eventually bring down the entire structure of lies they'd built. She was supposed to be the happy new addition to the Sterling family, grateful for their inclusion and blind to their dysfunction. Instead, she was publicly questioning why I'd been excluded while the dogs had premium accommodations. The breaking point came when Madison called me directly, her voice shaking with rage and barely contained panic. "Rebecca, whatever you're trying to prove with this little stunt, you've made your point. Now fix this. The rental company is threatening to call the sheriff if we can't settle the balance, and Jake's freaking out because Emma's parents are arriving tomorrow and the place looks like a disaster zone." "What stunt?" I asked innocently, currently relaxing in a hot tub overlooking an alpine vista that cost more per night than their entire cabin rental. "I'm just enjoying the vacation you all thought I needed. You know, learning to live a little instead of always being so serious about everything." I repeated my father's exact words back to her, and the silence that followed was deeply satisfying. But Madison wasn't finished. "Don't act stupid, Rebecca. You know exactly what you did. You pulled your cards from everything and left us hanging. Mom's crying, Dad's having chest pains from stress, and Jake might lose Emma over this disaster. Is that really what you wanted? To destroy Christmas for everyone?" The accusation that I was destroying Christmas was particularly rich coming from someone who'd spent months planning my exclusion. But what Madison didn't realize was that this was just the opening move in a much larger game. The financial embarrassment at the cabin was designed to reveal their true priorities and dependencies. Once they returned home, they'd discover that their reliable family bank had permanently closed its doors. Hidden in my designer ski jacket pocket was a folder of documents that would reshape their understanding of our family dynamics forever. Legal papers that would formalize the end of my financial involvement in their lives, detailed accounting of every unpaid debt, and a few surprises about their individual financial situations that I'd uncovered through my professional connections. The Sterling family was about to learn that dismissing their most valuable member had consequences that extended far beyond a single Christmas vacation. Emma's latest Instagram story showed her packing her bags early, with the caption, "Sometimes you realize the real gift is knowing when to leave. Rebecca Sterling, girl, I owe you a drink for showing me what self-respect looks like." The fact that my brother's fiancé was publicly thanking me for demonstrating how to escape their family dysfunction was better than any Christmas present I could have imagined. The first domino fell on December 28th, when Madison called from the cabin in hysterics. "Rebecca, you have to help us. The dogs destroyed something expensive, and now they're demanding an additional $3,000 damage deposit. Jake doesn't have it, and my cards are maxed from Christmas shopping. Please, I'm begging you." Her voice cracked with genuine desperation, a far cry from her usual entitled demands disguised as sisterly requests. What made her plea particularly satisfying was that she still didn't understand the permanent nature of my withdrawal from their financial circus. She assumed this was temporary punishment that could be resolved with sufficient groveling and future promises. Instead, I was currently reviewing the legal documents I'd spent months preparing. Ironically, while enjoying the luxury suite they'd inadvertently funded through years of uncollected loans. "Madison, I'm really sorry you're dealing with that stress," I replied, my voice carefully modulated to sound sympathetic while remaining completely unhelpful. "Have you tried calling Dad? Or maybe Jake could ask Emma's parents for a short-term loan. I'm sure they'd understand it's just a temporary cash flow issue." Each suggestion was designed to highlight exactly how uncomfortable they'd become asking anyone else for money, because other people expected actual repayment. The real entertainment began when my father called an hour later, his voice carrying the particular strain that meant he'd been arguing with my mother about whose responsibility it was to fix me. "Rebecca, sweetheart, your mother and I have been talking, and we realize there may have been some miscommunication about Christmas. We never meant for you to feel excluded from the family gathering. Maybe we could all sit down after the holidays and clear the air." His attempt at diplomatic resolution might have worked on the old Rebecca, the one who'd spent years absorbing their casual cruelties and returning favors with financial assistance. But this Rebecca had spent her Christmas week being treated like the valued client I'd always been everywhere except home. "That sounds wonderful, Dad. I'd love to clear the air about a lot of things, actually. I've been doing some organizing over the holidays and found some interesting paperwork I think we should all review together." The silence that followed told me he'd caught the subtle threat in my tone. My father was smart enough to recognize that his accountant daughter had access to information that could make family conversations very uncomfortable. What he didn't yet realize was how comprehensively I'd documented their pattern of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. Emma's social media posts from the final days of their trip painted an increasingly clear picture of Sterling family dynamics. Her Instagram story showed Jake stress eating while scrolling through loan applications, Madison arguing with her mother about fairness and family obligations, and my parents whispering intensely about solutions and damage control. The caption read, "When you realize you've been watching a slow-motion train wreck and calling it family bonding time, some people really know how to make their own beds." But Emma's most revealing post came on their last night at the cabin. A photo of her engagement ring sitting on the bathroom counter with the caption, "Funny how a piece of jewelry can represent so many different things. Love, commitment, financial stability, family acceptance, or just really expensive guilt." Starting to wonder which one I actually got. The implication that she was questioning her engagement to Jake because of his family's dysfunction was the kind of nuclear chaos I'd hoped to achieve. The new year brought the real fireworks when I received a group text from my mother, attempting to organize a family meeting to resolve our recent misunderstandings and plan for a better 2024. The message was sent to me, Madison, Jake, and notably included Emma, clearly trying to leverage peer pressure and witnesses to force my compliance with whatever narrative they'd constructed to explain away my absence and their financial crisis. My response was brief but devastating. "I'd be happy to meet with everyone. I've prepared a comprehensive presentation about family finances and relationship patterns that should clear up any confusion. I can reserve a conference room at my office for January 6th at 2 p.m. Professional environment might be best for this type of discussion." The subtle threat of treating our family dysfunction as a business problem to be solved with documentation and evidence clearly rattled them. Jake tried calling immediately after receiving my text. His voice barely controlled panic. "Rebecca, what kind of presentation? What are you talking about? Look, I know we messed up with Christmas, but can't we just talk about this normally? Like family? His plea for normal family dynamics was particularly ironic, given that normal for the Sterlings had always meant my silent financial support of their various disasters. Of course, Jake, that's exactly what I want, to talk normally about family patterns and expectations. I think everyone will find my research very illuminating. I've been working on it for quite a while now. The fact that I'd been collecting evidence for over 2 years while maintaining my facade of willing family support was a detail that would make the eventual revelation even more devastating. Madison's response to the group text revealed her growing awareness that she'd underestimated the scope of my retaliation. Maybe we don't need a formal meeting. We could just grab coffee and chat about whatever's bothering Rebecca. Keep things casual and family-friendly. Her suggestion of casual discussion was clearly an attempt to avoid the documented accountability that a formal presentation would provide. But Emma's response sealed their fate. Actually, I'd love to attend Rebecca's presentation. After this week, I have a lot of questions about family dynamics and financial boundaries that I think would benefit from some professional perspective. Plus, someone should probably document this conversation for future reference. The fact that Jake's fiancé was actively supporting my demand for transparency while expressing suspicion about her future in-laws was better than any revenge I could have scripted. My parents' desperate attempts to regain control of the narrative included multiple voicemails about family loyalty, forgiveness, and not airing dirty laundry in professional settings. But each message only reinforced my certainty that they'd never seen me as anything more than a resource to be exploited when convenient and dismissed when inconvenient. The Sterling family was about to discover that their middle daughter hadn't just been keeping financial records. I'd been building a case study in family dysfunction that would permanently alter their understanding of power dynamics and consequences. They'd trained me to be invisible and useful, never realizing I'd been documenting everything while planning my escape. January 6th arrived with the precision I'd always brought to my professional life, except this time the stakes were personal, and the outcome was guaranteed to be permanently life-changing. I'd reserved Conference Room A at my consulting firm, a sleek, intimidating space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a presentation system that made every detail impossible to ignore. The Sterling family filed in looking like defendants arriving for sentencing, which wasn't far from the reality they were about to face. Madison entered first, clearly attempting to project confidence, while her eyes darted nervously around the corporate environment that emphasized exactly how seriously I was treating this confrontation. Jake followed, his usual easy charm replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone who'd spent weeks unsuccessfully trying to manage multiple financial crises. My parents came next, Dad's jaw set in the stubborn expression that meant he was prepared to fight, Mom clutching her purse like a shield against whatever accusations were coming. Emma was the last to arrive, and her presence transformed the entire dynamic of the room. She wasn't family yet, which made her both witness and potential judge of Sterling family dysfunction. More importantly, she represented Jake's future, a future that would be directly impacted by whatever truths I was about to reveal. Her decision to attend despite obvious family pressure demonstrated a level of backbone that none of them had anticipated. "Thank you all for coming," I began, activating the presentation system with the same professional demeanor I used for corporate clients. "I've prepared a comprehensive analysis of our family's financial and emotional patterns over the past 3 years. I think you'll find the data quite revealing." The first slide displayed a simple title, "The Sterling Family Dynamic, a case study in financial exploitation and emotional manipulation." The sharp intake of breath from my mother told me the clinical language had achieved its intended effect, transforming their familiar family narrative into an objective problem to be analyzed and solved. Madison shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while Jake stared at the screen like he was seeing his family for the first time through an outsider's eyes. "Let's begin with the financial data," I continued, advancing to a slide that displayed every loan, gift, and financial assistance I'd provided over 3 years. The numbers were stark and undeniable. $37,462 in direct financial support, with detailed breakdowns showing that exactly $0 had been repaid, despite multiple promises and repayment schedules. Emma leaned forward, clearly calculating the implications of these numbers for her future with Jake. "Wait, you've been supporting the entire family financially for 3 years?" Her question hung in the air like an accusation, forcing everyone to confront the reality they'd been collectively ignoring. "That's not fair," Madison protested, her voice rising defensively. "Those were loans and gifts between family members. You can't just itemize love like it's a business transaction." Her attempt to reframe financial exploitation as familial affection was exactly the kind of manipulation I'd been documenting. I advanced to the next slide, emotional labor and family contributions. This chart showed the stark imbalance between my contributions to family functions, planning, coordination, cleanup, gift purchasing, travel arrangements, versus the minimal reciprocal effort from siblings. The data was devastating because it was completely objective and verifiable. "This is ridiculous," my father interrupted, his voice carrying the authority he'd always used to shut down uncomfortable conversations. "Rebecca, we raised you better than to treat family relationships like some kind of corporate audit. This kind of accounting isn't how love works." "You're absolutely right, Dad. Love isn't transactional," I replied, my voice remaining professionally calm while delivering the killing blow. Which is why I was so confused when my love and support were repeatedly taken for granted, while my presence at family gatherings was deemed expendable. Apparently, the dog's comfort was more important than including your middle daughter in Christmas celebrations. The silence that followed was electric with tension. Emma's eyes widened as she processed the full scope of my exclusion from Christmas, while Jake looked physically ill as he realized how his family's treatment of me appeared to his fiancé. Madison opened her mouth to protest, then clearly thought better of it as she realized anything she said would only dig the hole deeper. But I wasn't finished. The next slide revealed my masterpiece: individual credit reports and financial vulnerabilities. Through my professional network and completely legal channels, I'd obtained comprehensive financial profiles on each family member. The results were catastrophic for their sense of financial security and personal privacy. Madison's credit score had dropped to 580 due to maxed out cards and missed payments. Jake's student loans were in forbearance, his car was upside down on financing, and his savings account contained less than $400. My parents had been living on credit card advances to maintain their lifestyle, with their mortgage payment consuming nearly 60% of Dad's retirement income. "How did you get this information?" my mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she stared at the detailed breakdown of their collective financial disasters. "Professional networks and public records," I replied matter-of-factly. "Amazing how much information becomes available when you understand financial systems and reporting requirements, the same skills you've been exploiting for 3 years. The implication that I'd been quietly monitoring their financial health while they assumed I was simply their personal ATM created a new layer of discomfort. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor. "Jake, we need to talk, privately. Now." Her tone brooked no argument, and the look she gave him contained a full relationship evaluation based on everything she'd learned about his family's dynamics and his passive participation in my financial exploitation. As they stepped into the hallway, I could hear Emma's voice through the conference room door. "How long were you planning to let your family use your sister as a personal bank? And when exactly were you going to mention that your entire lifestyle is subsidized by someone you don't even invite to Christmas?" The relationship implications of my revelations were clearly more devastating than the financial ones. Madison tried desperately to regain control of the narrative. "Rebecca, I know you're hurt about Christmas, but this is going too far. You're destroying Jake's relationship and embarrassing the whole family with this corporate nonsense. Can't we just agree that mistakes were made and move forward?" I smiled for the first time since the meeting began, and the expression clearly unnerved everyone remaining in the room. "Madison, you're absolutely right that mistakes were made. The mistake was assuming your family banker would continue subsidizing your lifestyle indefinitely, while accepting scraps of respect and inclusion. That mistake is now permanently corrected." The final slide of my presentation contained just 4 words that would reshape our family dynamics forever. Effective immediately. Financial independence. The Sterling family safety net had officially been removed, and their comfortable lives built on my silent support were about to experience some very uncomfortable adjustments. The aftermath of my presentation created a family meltdown that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Within 48 hours, Jake called to inform me that Emma had ended their engagement, not because of the financial revelations, but because of what she called his complete moral bankruptcy in enabling his family's treatment of Rebecca. She'd returned the ring I'd secretly helped finance and moved out of the apartment she'd discovered was partly subsidized by my regular transfers to Jake's account. She said she couldn't marry someone who would stand by and watch his sister be treated like a walking ATM. Jake explained during what would be our last phone conversation. His voice carried a defeat that went beyond losing a fiancé. He was finally confronting the reality of who he'd become under our family's toxic dynamic. "Rebecca, I know we messed up, but Emma was supposed to be my future. You've destroyed everything." The beautiful irony was that I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply removed myself from supporting the illusion they'd built. Emma had made her own choice based on complete information about Sterling family values and priorities. The fact that transparency had ended Jake's engagement only proved how fundamentally rotten the foundation of their relationship had been. Madison's reaction was far more dramatic and infinitely more satisfying. Unable to make her minimum credit card payments without my monthly loans, she'd been forced to move out of her trendy downtown apartment and back into our parents' basement. The same woman who deemed me unworthy of Christmas cabin space was now sleeping in a childhood bedroom, while her 3 golden retrievers destroyed what remained of Mom's carefully curated home decor. "I hope you're happy," she sobbed during her desperate 2 a.m. phone call 3 weeks after my presentation. "I've lost my apartment, My credit is ruined, and I had to surrender 2 of the dogs to rescue because I can't afford their care, all because you decided to throw a tantrum about Christmas. Her complete inability to connect her current disasters to years of financial irresponsibility was exactly the kind of willful blindness I'd been documenting. The most devastating blow came when my parents discovered the true scope of their financial dependency on my support. Without my regular transfers disguised as helping with unexpected expenses, they couldn't maintain their mortgage payments. The kitchen renovation they'd proudly shown off to neighbors was financed entirely by equity they couldn't afford to lose. Their comfortable retirement was built on the assumption that their responsible middle daughter would continue indefinitely subsidizing their lifestyle. Rebecca, we need to sit down and work this out like adults, my father said during his attempt at patriarchal authority restoration. This family falling apart doesn't benefit anyone, least of all you. Maybe we took your support for granted, but that's because we trusted you to be the bigger person when conflicts arose. His appeal to my supposedly infinite capacity for family sacrifice was the same manipulation they'd used for years, positioning my compliance as maturity while framing my boundaries as selfishness. But those tactics only worked on someone who still needed their approval. The Sterling family was about to learn that their reliable daughter had found validation elsewhere. Through my professional network, I'd been recruited for a senior consulting position with a firm based in Seattle, 3 states away from Sterling family drama and twice my current salary. The timing wasn't coincidental. I'd been quietly building my exit strategy for months while maintaining the facade of family loyalty. My new colleagues valued my analytical skills and financial expertise without expecting me to subsidize their personal lives. The final nuclear bomb dropped when Emma published a detailed Instagram post about her experience with the Sterling family. She didn't mention names, but anyone following her previous posts would easily connect the dots. PSA: when someone shows you who they really are through how they treat their family, believe them. Found out my ex-fiance's family had been financially exploiting his sister for years, while excluding her from family events. The sister is a successful professional who deserves so much better. Sometimes the trash takes itself out when you show them the door. Her post went viral within days, shared by thousands of people who'd experienced similar family exploitation. The comments section became a support group for family scapegoats who'd been taken for granted by relatives who valued them only as resources. Several of Emma's local friends recognized enough details to identify the Sterling family specifically, creating social consequences that extended far beyond financial embarrassment. Madison tried recruiting extended family to pressure me into resuming my role as family financier, but her efforts backfired spectacularly when our cousins started asking uncomfortable questions about why they'd never heard about my years of family support or my exclusion from Christmas. The broader family network began recognizing patterns of Sterling entitlement and manipulation that had been hidden under carefully managed appearances. My mother's final attempt at emotional manipulation came through a handwritten letter delivered to my office. Rebecca, I know you're angry, but this punishment has gone too far. Your father's health is suffering from the stress. Madison is severely depressed, and Jake is talking about leaving Colorado entirely. Is your hurt pride really worth destroying the family that raised and loved you? The letter perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with Sterling family dynamics. My legitimate grievances reduced to hurt pride, their financial and emotional consequences framed as my responsibility to fix, and the assumption that I should sacrifice my well-being to maintain their comfort. It also confirmed that my extraction from their lives was having exactly the impact I'd calculated it would. I drafted a brief response that would end our relationship permanently. Mom, the family that raised and loved me wouldn't have needed 3 years of financial documentation to understand why excluding me from Christmas while prioritizing dogs' comfort was wrong. The consequences you're experiencing are the natural result of your choices and priorities. I hope they help you understand what you actually lost. The Sterling family had trained me to be invisible, useful, and grateful for scraps of inclusion. Instead, they'd created someone who understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves, who documented their exploitation with professional thoroughness, and who had the resources and resolve to permanently extract myself from their toxic system. Their comfortable lives built on my silent support were collapsing exactly as I'd planned, and there would be no rescue coming from their former family bank. 6 months after my Seattle relocation, I received a wedding invitation that marked the complete vindication of my strategic withdrawal from the Sterling family disaster. Emma was marrying a software engineer she'd met through work, someone whose family apparently valued professional competence and personal integrity. The ceremony would be held at a vineyard I'd actually recommended during her engagement to Jake, back when I was still trying to maintain family peace. More telling than the invitation itself was the handwritten note Emma had included. Rebecca, I know this might seem weird, but you were the one bright spot in that whole family mess. Your strength in walking away from people who didn't appreciate you inspired me to stop settling for less than I deserved. I'd love to have you at the wedding if you're willing to travel back to Colorado. You showed me what self-respect looks like. Her request to have me attend her wedding while completely excluding my former family was the kind of social justice I'd never dared hope for. The woman Jake had lost specifically because of their treatment of me was now publicly choosing my company over theirs. I RSVP'd yes immediately and bought a gift from their registry that cost more than Jake's monthly salary. Meanwhile, the Sterling family's financial and social collapse had accelerated beyond my most optimistic projections. Madison had been forced to declare bankruptcy, losing not only her apartment and remaining dog, but also her car and most of her designer possessions. She was currently working retail at a mall jewelry store, living in a studio apartment across town from our parents, because even their basement had become uninhabitable after a pipes burst from neglect. Jake had indeed left Colorado, taking a sales position in Phoenix that barely covered his basic expenses. His social media presence had dwindled to occasional posts about hiking alone and vague inspirational quotes about learning from mistakes and rebuilding from the ground up. Several mutual friends had mentioned seeing him at networking events, clearly struggling to present himself as a viable professional while carrying the social stigma of his family's dysfunction. My parents had been forced to sell their house and move into a senior living community that accepted residents with limited assets. The transition from their spacious suburban home to a 2-bedroom apartment had required them to liquidate most of their possessions and acknowledge the reality of their financial situation. Dad's health issues had worsened under the stress, while Mom had developed what she called anxiety, but was clearly depression over losing control of her carefully curated family image. The final confirmation of my complete victory came through a mutual colleague who'd attended a Denver business conference. He'd encountered my father at a networking mixer where Dad had attempted to leverage their shared connection to me for some kind of professional opportunity. Your dad kept talking about how proud he was of your success and how close your family had always been, my colleague reported. It was really uncomfortable because he seemed desperate to convince everyone you had some kind of special relationship. The pathetic irony of my father publicly claiming pride in achievements he'd dismissed and family closeness he'd actively undermined was exactly the kind of self-destructive behavior I'd expected. He was now trying to trade on the reputation of the daughter he'd trained to be invisible, hoping strangers would offer him the professional courtesy he'd never shown me. At Emma's wedding, I was seated at a table with her professional colleagues who knew nothing about Sterling family history, but were fascinated by my consulting work and Seattle lifestyle. Several of them exchanged business cards with me, leading to client referrals that boosted my new firm's profile significantly. The wedding became not just social vindication, but professional advancement. Exactly the kind of win-win outcome that had always eluded me in Sterling family dynamics. During the reception, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation that felt like the final seal on my successful revenge. Rebecca, I need you to know that leaving Jake was the best decision I ever made, and you're the one who showed me it was possible. Watching how your family treated you versus how they treated those dogs was such a wake-up call about what kind of people they really were. She continued, Jake kept insisting it wasn't that bad, that families just had complicated dynamics, that you were overreacting to being excluded from one holiday. But I realized that anyone who could watch their sister be treated like that and do nothing wasn't someone I could trust to protect me or our future children. You saved me from making a terrible mistake. The wedding photographer captured me laughing genuinely, surrounded by new professional connections, celebrating the happiness of someone who'd chosen integrity over convenience, wearing a designer dress I'd bought with my substantial salary increase. The woman in those photos bore no resemblance to the family doormat who'd spent years absorbing Sterling dysfunction and returning it with financial support. My phone remained blissfully silent throughout the celebration. No desperate calls about family emergencies, no guilt trips about missing holidays, no requests for financial assistance disguised as temporary loans. The Sterling family had finally learned to solve their own problems, though their solutions involved bankruptcy, therapy, and social exile, rather than personal growth and genuine remorse. As I flew back to Seattle the next morning, scrolling through Emma's wedding photos on social media, I noticed that several of our mutual connections had commented on how happy and successful I looked. The contrast with my old family photos was striking. In Sterling family pictures, I'd always been the responsible backdrop for other people's celebrations, useful but unremarkable. In Emma's wedding photos, I was clearly thriving as the center of my own story. The Sterling family had taught me that blood relationships meant accepting whatever treatment relatives chose to dish out, that family loyalty required endless financial sacrifice, and that questioning toxic dynamics made me the problem rather than pointing toward the solution. Instead, they'd trained me to recognize manipulation, document exploitation, and execute strategic withdrawal with devastating effectiveness. They'd wanted a family bank with no withdrawal limits and no accountability requirements. They got exactly what they deserved when their most valuable asset liquidated itself and invested elsewhere. The dogs they'd prioritized over my Christmas inclusion were probably enjoying better living situations than any of them could currently afford. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people experience the natural consequences of their choices while you build something better somewhere else.